Grapple Arts Radio.
Hey everybody, I'm just back fresh from training, and I'm talking to another guy who's back fresh from training, at least a couple hours ago, Eddie Wolverine Cummings. And I'm super excited about this because I've loved Leglocks for a long time, but this guy has taken them further than just about anybody. So we are going to pick his brain about Leglocks and a whole lot of other things related to jiu-jitsu. So first of all, hello Eddie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hello Stephan. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. So, all right, first question. What's the last submission that you hit that wasn't a leg lock?
Like in training or in a competition?
Well, we'll go with training. We just want to reassure ourselves.
Okay.
That, people who learn leg locks still remember how to do an armbar.
Yeah, no, it didn't armbar. I think the last submission I hit today was an armbar. So
okay.
There you have it. Like not maybe an hour and a half ago.
Okay.
So, yeah, an armbar, believe it or not, from the back of all things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so that was down at Henzo's place?
Yes, it was down at the main academy. I actually live a few blocks away, so.
Okay. So what did your training session consist of? Were you just drilling today, or were you sparring, or what were you doing?
Today was drilling. I woke up early, got some drilling in. Did my, it's a Sunday, so I try to do my laundry on Sundays. Then I head down to the academy. I take a private lesson with my instructor, John Danaher. I uki the private for about 2 hours, and then I do some basic gymnastics work. I'm trying to get better at that, and then some more repping and some sparring here and there. So light day today overall.
Okay, but you're still on the mat. One way or the other for hours and hours and hours.
Yes. Yeah, I'm probably on the mats, 8 hours a day on average, probably. On the mats. Not bowling, but on the mats.
Do you take any days off as a part of your regular schedule, or?
I try to take Sundays, like those are my lighter days. I used to try to take a day off a week. I just, I'll listen to my body. I know everyone always says that. But most of the time I'm training every day. I like training. I like being on the mats. I like thinking about jiu-jitsu. Like if I'm not on the mats, I'm probably watching tape or studying stuff or repping and with my training dummy at home. So or playing with ideas. I'm usually always in the game. I like it a lot. So.
And for those young kids among us listening to this show, by tape you mean YouTube or or DVD. YouTube, watching, watching online videos. Oh, okay. All right, I've heard of those. So I'm watching a ton of matches, competition footage. I subscribe to all the instructional sites, so I'm watching what's going on there. Yeah. So are you just scanning that stuff for what's your algorithm when you're scanning that? Whether it fits into your game or whether it's something that you should be watching out for other people trying on you, or just trying to absorb it all and see what sticks?
Yeah, all three of those things certainly are, will be different focuses depending on the day. Usually my priority is always to, if I'm trying to work something new into my game or figure out why a technique's working or why it's not, I'll try to research tape. So a lot of times I'll rewatch matches that I know of where a certain position arose, and I'll try to see how better grapplers handle it. So I get a sense of it. So usually that's my priority. If I have something that's relevant to my game that I want to study, maybe someone came up with a cool counter or somebody's just tearing somebody apart with a certain Achilles lock, I'll certainly watch that first. Mm-hmm. I will definitely research, I've done a lot of research project on random movements and positions that, nobody would believe. I did a big study on a lot of wrestling with single legs in particular, particularly certain setups for them. So I'll go through phases, but yeah, mostly I'm focusing on what's for my game. Although I love watching good grapplers roll. Every tournament that comes out, Ghee or Nogi, I'm always watching the whole tournament. So, and then I'll go back and try to analyze interesting matches or, new ideas or things like that.
Well, it's interesting that you say Ghee or Nogi because certainly you have a reputation of being, a Nogi competitor. How much training do you do with the Ghee and how much do you do without the Ghee?
I don't do a lot with the Ghee, especially when I have Nogi matches coming up. You know, in the off season, if I don't have anything scheduled, I'll do not a lot of Ghee, but, you know, maybe 2 times a week, maybe, you know, on a good week, maybe once a week otherwise. I like the Ghee a lot, actually. I actually find the Ghee easier than Nogi in a lot of ways.
Really?
As funny as that sounds. Yeah, I feel there's a lot more controlling grips, and it's a lot easier to get to stable controlling positions in the Ghee than it is in Nogi.
Okay.
You know, it's I always felt like Nogi jiu-jitsu was like playing chess with a gorilla, you know. When you got to a position you liked, it's just going to knock the table over at any random point. It's, you know, I always felt it a bit more, I actually, to this day, I find it more challenging than the Ghee. I think I'm better in Nogi, but Ghee makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
Nogi, it's just, again, it's hard to find a stable controlling grip or position. There's very few of them, Nogi. Okay. You know, people talk about them a lot, but in application, you don't see people statically held in positions Nogi, you know, or there's very few statically held positions in Nogi, you know, if you watch high-level grapplers go at it.
So what would be examples of static control positions in Nogi? I'm guessing you're going to say you're going to include some Leglocks. Leglocks positions in there.
Yeah, but believe it or not.
Yeah, weird.
Well, for example, take side control, okay? In the Ghee, with Ghee grips, it's actually a very controlling position. You see people held there for very long periods of time, you know, even in high-level competition where there's really high stakes and, you know, the person desperately needs to even just get the turtle to avoid points. And you see in the Ghee much more so than, say, Nogi, you see people held down in the Ghee. Whereas Nogi, side control, I mean, if they get a really good wedge grip under the hips or something, like the way Braulio or Hodger control side, like they can get a good pin. But without that, you know, just a standard side control, like head and arm, and the person has a throat frame in, if they're the same size as you, it's not at all a controlling position. You know, the person's going to move and escape, and you're going to have to transition. You know, despite what's traditionally taught, maybe. You know, I think without the Ghee on, you know, the game does change a lot like that. Like there's, like I said, fewer controlling positions, I think.
Would you count rear mount with an over-under or seatbelt as a controlling position?
Oh, yeah, that's certainly a very, very controlling position, Nogi and Ghee. Yeah.
Okay.
I think you can see people held there for long periods of time, particularly when you start throwing in a body triangle.
Right.
You know, you see people held there in MMA for, you know, a whole match, a whole round.
Right.
So, yeah, I definitely include that as to one of the stable controlling positions in Nogi.
Okay. So then when people think of a leg lock, they think of grabbing an ankle, falling back, one sort of a single leg X guard style position. You know, people call that different things. You know, one shin through the crotch, the other foot on the hip, and that's what they think of as a leg lock position. So how finely, and whether that's a control position or not, we can debate about. But if that's a position, how finely do you slice, you know, a leg lock control? How many different positions do you think that there are, or variations of once you get to an ankle and you're hanging onto it and you're somehow wrapping the guy's legs up with your own legs?
Yeah, like basically how many ways are there to wrap up, to isolate a single leg away from the body, with our, you know, with our head towards the foot, so to speak.
Yes.
There's, I mean, in terms of leg positions, really there's 3 different leg positions, right? In the broad scheme of things. I can have my legs to the outside of my opponent's body or to the inside, you know, more of a standard Sambo reaping position. Or I can have them separated in either that standard single leg X position, or if I can reverse my feet even and play more of an Estima style Ashigarami, where my inside foot's on the hip and my outside foot plays like an outside butterfly hook on the leg.
Okay.
So really there's 3 different types of controls. My legs can be connected on the outside, connected on the inside, or separated. And then the foot can be on either side. It can be on my outside or my inside as well. So essentially there's 6 main positions, but a lot of details within each one on how we're controlling that, and a lot of variations on how we control each one.
Yeah.
But, yeah, essentially there's about 6, I'd say. This is kind of excluding knee bar positions, but I sort of consider them an offshoot of the inside leg positions. So.
Okay. And, yeah, now
turning your entire body to face essentially the shin, or face the leg, as opposed to looking in the same direction as the toes, sort of, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting how once somebody becomes a specialist in one area, how they kind of open up something that everybody else sees as one position or sort of one thing, and they go, no, hang on, there are actually a whole bunch of different variables. It's almost an opposite thing of that, when experts can quickly sum up a position and go, okay, this is overall what's happening here, right? When they do those experiments with chess grandmasters who can look at a board and in 1 or 2 seconds
and they analyze their brains,
Yeah.
No, I've seen a lot of studies like that. I think actually you hit the nail on the head in that maybe I'm not an expert. Maybe we're just starting to get into Leglocks, and there's a lot more to be understood, and I'm still in that complexity phase, where the intermediary player looks and sees complexity. Perhaps the master sees simplicity, and I'm just not there yet.
Well, if you're not there yet, then who is? So that's one thing. And secondly, maybe it's because that chess grandmaster can fine slice that position so finely that he recognizes it as a specific slice, as opposed to what I would see, which is a whole bunch of pieces all over the mat, and I could recognize it as a chess game, and I could recognize that black's got a lot more pieces than white. But that's it, right? That's the level of my analysis. Whereas he can see, oh yes, this is just like the Hungarian opening with a, a side of the Danube close or whatever.
I like it. I believe there actually may be a Hungarian opening, although I'm not familiar with it. But I appreciate it. Sounded like a very chess terminology. Name it after a place.
Yeah, well, thank you.
It's a new variation of the Hungarian opening. No, it sounds legit. I mean,
I should have just said it with more conviction, and 80% of people would think that we. Oh, not only do they do jiu-jitsu, they're also, totally conversant about chess. All right, well let's.
I wouldn't have judged you.
well, let's do the sort of traditional thing. Like, can you take us through who you've trained with over the years and who's been influential in your development as a grappler to this point? So, how long ago did you start training, Eddie?
I will have been training for a full 6 years as of 2 weeks ago. So 6 years as of 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I got my black belt almost a year ago, so in about 5 years. 5 years.
So at a very good clip.
Yeah, well, it wasn't bad. I started at my college club at Stony Brook University. I trained under a man named Krishna Mirza, who's a Matt Serra. At the time, he was a Matt Serra purple belt. I believe he's a Matt Serra brown belt, but he's been around the game for maybe a decade when I started. So he was around for a while. I'm a very, very good technical instructor. I trained with him for about 2 years, and then I've been in the city training with John Danaher for 4 years, and he's the one who gave me my purple, brown, and black belt. I got my blue belt from Krishna, my first instructor. Both instructors, extremely technical. I describe them both as very cerebral and just always looking for technical solutions to every problem, never, just get stronger. So I really credit them a lot with sort of my development. A lot of instructionals, too, a lot of tape. Your instructionals, as I mentioned to you earlier, were definitely influential to me as a white belt. I love the BJJ roadmap. I still recommend it to white belts to read. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I mean, just giving some clarity, I think, is very needed. In a white belt's mind, it's always there's a lot going on in jiu-jitsu. I think, as you're just describing, seeing a chessboard and not knowing what's going on. If you don't know chess at all, you just see a lot of pieces and a lot of complexity. And I think as you start even learning a little bit, it gets harder at first. It just seems like there's just so much information. And sometimes it's nice to have someone just sort of break it down and say, look, here's the high percentage things you need to worry about. Here are the general patterns of positions. Start from there and then work backwards.
Yeah, and then you can go off and develop whatever strange game entirely based around Kazagatame or leg locks or the sleeve choke, or you can then have the luxury to become a one-trick pony.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's just talk a little bit more about the influence of John Danaher on your training. So he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, obviously, but equally obviously, if he's kind of been your mentor in developing a rather unique stylistic game, he had to be open-minded to you going down the leg lock rabbit hole, as opposed to like, no, armbar from the quad, armbar from the quad.
I like that. Yeah, I'm going to tell him that one. I'm like, yeah, you should just teach arm bars from the god.
Yeah. So he obviously he's open-minded and not threatened by people developing their own unique games.
Yeah, I mean that's an understatement. I would almost call him ruthlessly open-minded. He's instilled in me that approach to the game, in the sense where, we approach it like scientists. Does it work? Does it not work? Why does it work? Any technique, not just leg locks in general. Always question authority. Just because some famous black belt said something doesn't mean it's right. Test it out. Let's see why it's right. Let's watch it in high-level competition. And so I think he's actually the one who taught me most of my leg locks. So to say he was open-minded to me developing the game, I mean, he encouraged the game.
Okay.
He saw me playing some single leg X. He's like, you should really play heel hooks from there. I'm like, yeah, they never work though.
Oh.
We laugh about some early conversations we had when I was a blue belt. But yeah, definitely, to say he influenced my game is a strong understatement.
Okay.
Just the way I'm thinking about grappling and movement. Yeah. I mean, he was a big reason why I became a professional, just because I had a teacher like that,
So would you say that, I mean, it's funny when you compared it to science, and I was having this conversation the other day, and I think one of the defining characteristics of science is a willingness to be proven wrong, right? If you can define a set of circumstances under which you could say, okay, everything I thought about, there is surely some data that we could get that would prove that the sun is not the center of a solar system and that the sun goes around the earth. And then we would have to reconsider a whole lot of astronomy. But, we could define a set of circumstances by which it could be possible to prove that particular thing wrong.
Yeah. And we'd accept it. It'd take us some time because we get ingrained in our own ways, but we would eventually come to accept it.
So with your own training, you've gone down some dead ends and rabbit holes and stuff that didn't pan out, I'm assuming.
Oh, my God. We're working out a game plan for this next tournament, and I have a whole bunch of new advanced leg locks, so to speak, and ideas and setups for them, and we're actually scrapping a bunch of that based on a counter we found recently. So we're going back to some, earlier approaches to the game, which is, it's gratifying. I keep a lot of detailed notes and videos, but it's just very interesting to see how much, you can go very deeply down the wrong rabbit hole, and then just you come to a cement wall, and you have to turn around and go back the way you came. So it's definitely frustrating, but it is, again, there's a certain beauty to that approach. That's why I use the word ruthlessly open-minded. We'll get rid of what we're doing if it's not working, even if it has proven successful in the past. John just actually took me aside the other day and was modifying my Udagatami armbar, where you like the Marcelo telephone armbar. Yep. And I was actually successful with it against a very, very good grappler who came in. And John yelled at me because I was off on some technical details of it. And he proceeded he actually taught that also today as well to me, just for the past, 5 or 6 days, going over the details with me and just warning me that the most dangerous thing in grappling is not failure. It's succeeding at the wrong thing. It's false positives. That's the most dangerous thing. He always feels that grapplers and fighters make a lot of mistakes. They fall in love with movements or incorrect movement patterns because
they work once or twice,
1 or 2 times, and they're not going to work at the high level. And it's just such a dead end, and you're committed to it. Because human beings naturally we're wired to fall into that sort of routine, to be diluted by that temporary success.
The tiger came at me and I jumped to the left and I survived. Therefore, every time a tiger comes at me, I should jump to the left.
Exactly. So we're wired to like that, I was out, I hunted a deer here one time, so it's likely the deer is going to be there again. I'm going to go hunting. And it's good because it teaches us persistence. Right. But in grappling, it can certainly be a detriment. And you see a lot of people who, how many times have you heard a guy be like, yeah, but I caught this guy in that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that doesn't necessarily mean the movement is good. The movement's something to be pursued, or it's even something that you're doing correctly.
So can you give me an example of a technique that comes to mind when it's like a technique that'll work against beginners but doesn't work at the high level, other than the scissor sweep?
I was going to say scissor sweep against the leg locker. Yeah, actually, I have a really good example of a technique. I was just discussing this with my instructor today. I was watching UFC Fight Night last night. A lot of interesting matches. Bader and Johnson was the main fight. And you see this in MMA. I actually study a lot of grapple box, too, with John. John is very well-versed in that aspect as well. So I just try to study it so I could be a good grappling corner someday, maybe for MMA guys. Mm-hmm. But if you watch MMA, and you'll see this in grappling sometimes as well, but in MMA in particular, there's an escape to mount you see almost every time someone's mounted in MMA. I mean, we're all taught, the basic upa escape. We're all taught the elbow escape, and you'll see these in MMA as well. But one of the most common bad escapes, in my opinion, you see in MMA is an elbow prop. You see people get mounted and they elbow prop to escape. It seems ridiculous, right?
You mean coming up onto their, turning half sideways?
Onto their elbow.
Up, right.
Yeah, exactly, and coming up to their elbow. They give up a one-on-one. They give up back control. There's Kimura attacks. Their neck's exposed. Triangle attacks are there. It's just, it seems awful. And you're getting hands on the mat, so you're getting punched in the face in MMA too. So I was asking John, why do you guys do this? I just thought it was a technical mistake. I'm like, but why does everyone make the same technical mistake there? I get it when you're getting punched. I've grappled box before. You're getting punched. You want to do something. But these are black belts. I think Kevin Casey did it on Sapo the other night too. I'm not sure if that happened in that match as well. I think I saw Bader try it briefly on Johnson before he got finished. And I'm wondering what's going on. And John actually told me a very famous black belt used to teach this at every seminar he did. And he'd pick a white belt out of the crowd, say, mount me. The white belt would mount him, and he'd escape using an elbow prop. Now, this famous black belt fought MMA a lot and never actually did this escape in MMA in a live fight, but he taught it at every seminar. So now apparently it's just been taught as dogma. It's just been taught as correct technique. And John was telling me, it's actually a technique that people are taught. And I was appalled at this because it just never works. It just always has disastrous consequences. But, yeah, so that's a good example of a technique that's taught that, should never be taught. I think we all can agree that should not be the way you escape mount.
Sure.
Yeah. I think a lot of other techniques we can maybe debate, details, but that one in particular, I think we all can agree you shouldn't do, but it's taught and it's done. So.
Well, I guess if I would, so what you need to do is you need to do a giant seminar circuit of the country, teach everyone a horrendous way to escape the heel hook.
Mount. And then make a run
into the in the direction that his arms are, and then you just need conviction here, and then you then come back a couple years later and just have people destroy their own legs.
Yeah, and just put it in, they'll roll the wrong way. Just tell them, heel exposure. Make sure you give them a good bite on that heel, roll the wrong way, and if you hear tearing, just roll harder.
Yeah.
You just got to believe. You got to believe it.
That's weakness leaving the body right there.
Yeah, that means you're almost out. That means it's working.
Yeah. So then, speaking of
Leglocks, and speaking of injuries, let's start with why you are so drawn to Leglocks in general and heel hooks in particular. I'm sure you've had this conversation a million times, but indulge me. Give me the response. But Eddie, why are heel hooks so good?
Honestly, I didn't really start training heel hooks until I came to Henzo's. My first instructor was a very good instructor and very smart, and you shouldn't teach white belts, you shouldn't teach heel hooks to spazzy white belts,
Right.
You should probably not teach kimuras either, or, he was smart, it's not like, I still think you got to be careful when you have people sort of fresh into training. But
right.
when I came to Renzo's, first of all, heel hooks it's an open heel hook policy in John Danaher's class. Everyone heel hooks everyone. No one says, hi, can we work heel hooks? It's assumed, which can be very, very intimidating and traumatizing to a blue belt. When I came there as a blue belt, I got my ass kicked. I got leg locked a lot. I used to play a knee shield guard a lot, which is just,
right.
And they're all big Renzo's. They're all good. Yeah. And so it's like you get big, more skilled grapplers, try to put them in a knee shield guard when you don't know how to defend a leg lock.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long, long day, So I think I just saw, they were just very effectively used on me. So I started playing around with them. And I sort of discovered that even though I'm sort of physically smaller than most of my training partners, that the leg locks and the heel hook in particular could become an equalizer for me. Even, arm barring someone who's got 100 pounds on you and knows how to defend it. We're not just talking some bodybuilder who doesn't know how to defend himself. Like, these are black belts, or seasoned brown belts who know how to defend an arm bar, who are that much bigger than you. It is a hard thing to arm bar these people, a hard thing. Even if you get the dominant arm position, even if you manage to be on top with it, it's still not an easy thing. But a heel hook, much, much simpler to get once you get to isolate the leg. Much easier to finish.
You're attacking much smaller muscles and ligaments as opposed to big things like biceps.
That's exactly, I think I experienced the success with them first, but that's certainly the reason why. No one's strong. No one has a really strong ACL.
Right.
Certainly people can bicep curl a lot, but those twisting leg locks tend to be very, very damaging. And twisting, upper body submissions as well, like a Kimura attack can be very damaging as well. But even a shoulder is much stronger than a knee joint. So I think that's a large aspect of it. It was just what worked. And I was desperate to find what worked. And that was what was working. So I just embraced them. And then John saw me working them. And John Danaher has actually been working leg locks for a while. There really wasn't, anyone who showed interest, I think, or any reason necessarily. Leg locks were banned from most jiu-jitsu tournaments, 10 years ago. The heel hooks in particular, rather. Right. And, without a heel hook, a leg lock game is tough to implement. So I think, a lot of his heel hook teachings fell on deaf ears for a while just because they're not relevant for competition, But
I've also thought it was one of the most important moves for self-defense, because if you break somebody's arm, they can still pull a knife out with their other hand or get in their car and drive you, run you down. But it's pretty hard to run to that car if your ankles, if your leg is pointing out 180 degrees from the way it's supposed to be pointing.
Yeah. No, I agree entirely. It's also actually one of my main training partners is a woman as well, as a small woman, and I regularly see her every day submit very large men with this movement. Like the sort of the economy of motion offered in the heel hook is very appealing for self-defense for those exact purposes. And the ashigarami, single leg X guard, is originally a self-defense position from judo. The idea is someone can't stand on top of you and just punch you.
Right.
You'll wrap up their leg. So I think self-defense-wise, and, as you said, if you break someone's leg, they're not chasing after you, which if we're really forced to defend ourselves, the best answer is probably to run away. All these people talking about all these amazing self-defense techniques, like run away. And if you can't run, stop them from running after you and then run away, Like, I think people have this, illusion of a full-on MMA fight happening in the streets, and don't think that's wise.
Well, I've talked about this before, and I think it's apocryphal, but I don't know, I'm wondering if you ever heard this. So the myth is that the Russians, the reason Sambo had so many leg locks is because if they go out on the battlefield and they kill a man, they've disabled one man. But if they break his leg with a Sambo leg lock, now they've disabled three guys. One guy who can't walk and two guys who need to carry him. I can't actually.
I like the argument of it. I appreciate it, but I haven't researched that there. I've heard it a lot though.
I think I've actually even said it before. So
okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I'd rather stick with a gun
for that, though.
Yeah. I think maybe in the very desperate days of World War I or World War II, when they had absolutely no, they had one rifle and 3 men.
Yeah.
Maybe there were 2 designated leg lockers, but
two leg lockers and a rifleman.
Yeah. But here we are laughing at the giant. We've just lost the entire Russian audience. Sorry.
I know. This is just a horrible thing to be laughing about. Like, but anyway, I do. I mean, there is certainly a self-defense argument. If you break someone's leg, they're not following you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not waking up from being strangled unconscious and coming after you. And it's actually hard. People are always like, well, strangles, you kill somebody. It's actually pretty hard to kill somebody in a strangle.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot more time than people realize. Whereas a joint lock can be done very quickly, and you can be out of there. I think both have applications. But yeah, I believe in heel hooks and ashigarami for self-defense.
So now we've just been talking about all the effectiveness of heel hooks, and by that we're essentially talking about how little force it takes to apply it and how much damage you can do if you do apply it. So now, how on earth do you guys train this safely? And what's sort of the track record of ACL safety at the Danaher open mat sessions?
I mean, there's definitely a learning curve with heel hooks. And we apply them, if you're rolling with the blue belt or purple belt who is new to the class, we'll all apply them lighter. For certain. I won't put it in, especially if I see a guy's moving incorrectly, I'll even switch. I won't do heel hooks on him. I'll work my upper body submissions. And I'll just make a note, not to roll with that guy when I need to work Leglocks.
Mm-hmm.
We're fortunate that there's a lot of people in every class, so there's a lot to choose from. And like John Danaher's morning class is almost all regulars. Almost everyone in that room's been training heel hooks for the better part of a decade. So we know when we're in trouble. And everyone fights hard out of heel hooks. We all defend them tooth and nail. There's a lot of little things you can do to alleviate pressure. There's correct movements to make. You definitely don't want to make a wrong movement. You'll hurt yourself. But I think just being mindful and understanding how to work your way out and be willing to tap when you need to. Not that, again, there's definitely, a high intensity in the roles we have in that class. It's a real class. But certainly, and people do get hurt in heel hooks, but not as common as I think most people would believe would happen, when everyone's just going hard into heel hooks into each other. But we definitely apply them for real. If we're going with higher level grapplers, like when me and Gary Tonin train, we're putting heel hooks in for real. I think you kind of have to if the person's going to get a good look at a real escape. But, we have a rule at the Renzo Gracie Academy. John actually told us this, that the responsibility of the person applying the submission is to apply it slowly and controlled, not to protect the opponent, right? If they're protecting your training partner, you're doing them a favor. That's not your responsibility. It's your training partner's responsibility to defend himself intelligently and tap when necessary. So, it's definitely sort of a more intense culture, I'd say, in John's classes, but you learn quickly.
Sorry. So when you get the heel hook, I just want to follow up on that applying it slowly thing. You'll apply it powerfully, but you won't rip it per se.
Yeah, I'm not going to explode into it. And if I'm doing it right anyway, I should be able to control the position. It's good training for me. If I can't hold you down, I'm not going to be able to significantly break you anyway in a competition because you're going to be spinning and kicking and bucking. So I need to be able to control the position anyway. So it's good training for all purposes. But yeah, I'm going to apply it powerfully. I'm going to apply it right through my range of motion, but I'm going to apply it very slowly and consistently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to jerk anything, so to speak.
And so that, like as you point out, that's better training for you because you can actually maintain that position to apply it slowly. And then when you apply it fast in a competition, then it's going to be...
I'll have the control of the position as well,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly. I think you develop that control through the hand fight, through all that. But yeah, don't get me wrong. I used to teach, and I used to have a different role for my students than, my training partners.
my students' rule were you get to the hands, you free the knee, you tap. Like, that's your algorithm. If you can't touch their hands, you spin, you try to clear the knee line. You can't clear the knee line, you tap. There's no waiting for pain. There's no, kicking and trying anything stupid. That's your algorithm, and that's what I want everyone doing in tournaments. That's what I want everyone doing in training. A blue belt shouldn't be getting broken in a heel hook.
Right.
Like, that's not a productive thing.
No, by the time you're
if a black belt wants to push themselves,
maybe.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, then you know what you're doing. Then at least you're learning from it. So if you did do something stupid, hopefully you learned a lesson. You can explore the range of break. You can explore tension more when you're a higher belt. But at a lower belt, you're not exploring. You're just being stupid,
Right.
So I used to tell my students that all the time.
Well, I play a lot with Leglocks, certainly not as much as you have, and I've only damaged one person's knee, but it was 100% my fault. I remember it was I'm rolling, and I was taking it super easy that day, and there was this big, Italian bodybuilder guy, drove a Mustang. He was the stereotype, Jersey Shore kind of guy. And
I grew up on Long Island. I know exactly what you're describing.
And everything I would apply, I was being friendly, and he would just explode out of it. And finally, I sat back for a straight ankle lock.
Put one in for real.
No, not even. Sat back for a straight ankle lock, and I was sitting there watching what he was going to do. And I'm just sitting on my bum, sitting upright. I'm not even lying over. I haven't applied the ankle lock. And he spins as hard as he can one way, and then he spins as hard as he can the other way. And I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden, there's a popping sound. He starts dry heaving on the mat, and he'd torn his ACL. It was like getting his foot caught in a gopher hole and then trying to do a full pirouette to get out of it. So, but he was being an idiot.
That's incredible.
But as a white belt...
Well, was it really your fault then? That wasn't your fault at all.
You know what, I should have... at least if I'd had the talk going, look, you're using strength and explosiveness to explode out of everything. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to hurt yourself. Then if he'd hurt himself that way, I would have felt better. Or arguably, I could have controlled his ability to spin better, which I wasn't controlling. So... yes, he was a moron, or he was, let's say, way too enthusiastic. Yeah, that's pejorative. But I bear some
athletically enthusiastic.
Athletically enthusiastic. In love with his ability to, clean and jerk his entire body out of a submission. But still, I have some responsibility there, and that's that he was pretty new. And if it had been a black belt behaving like that, I would feel zero responsibility. If it had been a brown belt, even a purple belt, better by that point. Come on. So at that point, the onus does shift to, it's not your first pony ride. So, okay.
No, I think that's part of it too. And it's, John always yells at us. He says, there's nothing worse you can do than accidentally hurting your training partner. He's like, I don't care who it is, if you accidentally hurt them, that shows a lack of mastery of the ability of grappling. Like, if you intentionally hurt somebody, that's what we train to do, essentially, right? You don't actually want to intentionally hurt them, but, if you're going to hurt somebody, it should be in an intentional way, not accidentally.
Right.
He's yelled at many people for that. No, but I get what you're saying. You could have controlled the position better and all that, but it's, there's I wanted to talk to you actually about. I'm curious on your methods of instructing your white belts. What do you do when they show up their first day? Because there are a lot of people who show up, and it's hard to distinguish between enthusiasm for the art, and something that could blossom into a good grappler and someone who enjoys it, and someone who's just got way too much ego and just won't get anything out of this art no matter what. They're there to prove a point, and they're not going to be trained, so to speak. Yeah. What do you do on a day one to what do you show them? What do you tell them? Be calm, try not to use strength and explosiveness. Most people don't even know enough about how to move their bodies to necessarily respond to that.
Yeah,
I think told this guy that. I don't think the reaction was different. I think he does the same exact thing.
It might have ended the same way. And that's true.
You just feel better about it in this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's fine. It's all about making me feel better. It's all about alleviating my sense of guilt.
Alleviating your suffering, yeah.
Yeah. There is certainly, and I think I have a fair bit of success with this line of argument. There is a place for athleticism, for strength, for explosiveness in jiu-jitsu, but it's doing the correct movements explosively. They're doing the correct movements with strength. It's using your crazy flexibility the right way, whatever your attributes are.
Yeah.
But I think initially, it sort of ties in with the idea of first let's get the basics down, right? Let's let everybody, if you're training to be a painter, first learn how to paint a chair, right? It should look kind of sort of like a chair. Or if you paint an apple, it should look kind of sort of like an apple. Then after you can do that, well, now you can go all cubist or postmodern or deconstruct, whatever the art term du jour is. Or same thing with jiu-jitsu. Once you know the bridge and roll from the mount, once you learn the basic positions, then if you want to specialize in some super weird positions, be that your leg lock fixation, or somebody basing the whole game around wrapping the lapel 4 times around their opponent's leg, a la the worm guard thing. That's fine. But initially, or for that matter, using crazy explosiveness to, do a no-handed cartwheel in the air to pass the guard. But
no-handed cartwheel in the air. Have you seen someone try to pass the guard like that? That's impressive.
In MMA, in Japanese Shuto, the really? Lightweight. I forget who it was, and it was maybe about 5 years ago. There was that.
I'm writing this down now. I got to check this out.
Yeah, I will try to look for it and send it to you. I don't think it was in Pride. I think it was in Shuto, and it was right around that.
Was it successful?
Ooh, I think so. But you know what? Something like that is successful whether or not it works for 2 reasons. One, it makes the highlight reel. And number 2, you put the fear of God into your opponent, and now maybe you can go to your traditional knee cut pass. They're like, I had my guard pass.
Yeah. And then just fake that, and then just go to like a knee slide. Yeah,
exactly.
But sorry, I distracted you from the point. So what you're basically saying is you want them to learn all the, basics, quote unquote. I know that's a buzzword nowadays. Yeah. But to master that before they start branching off necessarily.
Yeah, and before you really start using your athleticism, okay, I know you can bench press 400 pounds, and that means you'll be able to do some techniques that nobody else will be able to do in class. But let's start with this, and then once you know the technique, then we'll be able to take advantage of your unique attributes, your ability to put both your legs behind
then you can
head.
Just bench people out of side control.
Yeah, and certainly, there is a utility to that, and there are people who've developed, escapes and techniques based off of attributes that nobody else has. I will never be a rubber guard player. I can't put both my feet behind my head. I used to be able to, but a series of injuries later, I will extremely doubt if I'll get that flexible again. And, that's not what I'm going to be doing. To use another knee bar example, or another leg lock example, there are all kinds of tweaks that you can do for things like the knee bar, but if the guy's leg is 4 times bigger than your leg, you're probably not going to be able to pull that.
Yeah.
If you're, 110-pound girl, maybe learn the knee bar.
Probably not going to finish that.
Yeah. There's a utility in learning it because you can learn to defend it, and there's utility in learning it. Maybe you can take out the other people in your division if you're fighting in a weight division. But,
or teaching it in the future. Most of our goals involve teaching this art.
Yeah. But back to the basics thing, I was thinking about this the other day. We all accept that jiu-jitsu is going to evolve, that new techniques are going to come along, new strategies are going to come along, new tactics, new philosophies, new approaches. The rolling back attacks that have taken over gi-based jiu-jitsu in the past 3-4 years is a good example. It has changed jiu-jitsu. But there's a certain comfort in going, but the basics don't change. But you know what? I'm realizing this the other day, that the basics are changing. The basics, maybe you don't teach a berimbolo to a brand new white belt. I get it. But something like the sit-up escape, which didn't really exist when I started training jiu-jitsu, right? If you wanted to get out of side mount, you would, put the guy back in your guard. You'd turn, you'd get an underhook and you'd go to the leg. maybe you turn away, run to that turtle. Maybe you try and roll the guys if there was a big size difference. But the whole,
Marcelo-style sit-up escape?
Marcelo-style sit-up escape that most of my friends are using to escape side mount when I have it. Most of my friends and training partners are frustrating the crap out of me with this. It's like, this is something that doesn't have a huge amount of attribute requirements, and it nicely complements the basic shrimp and regard escape.
Yeah.
So that's an example of the basics changing, and I think that's very threatening, actually, because you can always take refuge in like, oh well, we concentrate on the basics that work. Yeah, well, the basics that work change. And I've talked about this in the past, but I used to do a lot of whitewater kayaking, and I sort of started whitewater paddling towards the end of the early era, which was the early era. If somebody flipped in a race or flipped on the river and they did a roll, an Eskimo roll, people would stop. Like, it was pretty amazing. Like, people would stop and applaud, even though the guy might lose the race. It's like, oh my God, he did a roll. By the time I left the sport, and I didn't leave it because I didn't like it. I left it because I just had no more time to spend, 3 hours driving out to the river, 2 hours paddling, an hour doing a shuttle, 3 hours come back and just complete it. Kids will do that to you. They'll kill all the sports that you love. But I digress. People were learning the roll on their very first day in the pool, and they'd head out in the river, not able to do a basic maneuver, not able to catch an eddy, not able to do a ferry, not able to, do a brace, but they could roll. And it changed the game of whitewater paddling in a super fundamental way. And all of a sudden people were paddling things that were 10 times more difficult and also 10 times more dangerous than they used to, just because the consequences of wiping out in the middle of the rapid were no longer like, okay, now we've got a big rescue to do and everyone's going to chase the boat. And by the time we catch everybody, we'll be, half an hour downstream. And no, you'd flip over, you'd roll up. So in the same way, I think you'd be hard pressed to say, oh, we only train Nogi at our club, but we don't do Leglocks. Well, good luck with that, because as soon as those guys compete, they're going to get roped. Or if there's no
I think the culture changes too. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I agree, and I think that's the exciting part about the art too. It's scary to people who are just, who are maybe lazier, in their approach to jiu-jitsu, but it's exciting, I think, to people who want to see the art evolve. And that's a really good question. When do the basics start changing, quote unquote basics? I was watching a white belt class. I won't say at what school the other day, a Nogi class, not at my home school.
Okay.
And they're teaching passing on the knees to close guard in Nogi, mind you. So staying on your knees, you shuffle, you frame under the arms, you put your knee in the butt, and you open their closed guard, right? And then you stab the knee through and you go for a knee slide. Pretty fundamental, right? I learned this my first day. But when was the last time you saw in high-level competition a Nogi guy pass the closed guard on his knees without the bottom guy going for a triangle or something?
Yeah.
Can you think of an example?
Not really.
Everyone stands now, if you want to open the guard. But you still see these sort of vestigial structures in the way we teach jiu-jitsu, just because somebody was taught like that, and they just take it as gospel. They were taught like that, so they teach like that, without any reasoning behind it. And it's interesting when you start questioning the basics. Yeah, when do we start teaching sit-up escapes, along with the basic elbow escape to side control? And it's exciting to be a part of, an art that's evolving at this rate.
And when do we remove the appendixes of the jiu-jitsu body? When do we say, okay, well, this was relevant? The old single underhook guard pass that was taught in the Gracie Basics videos after the first UFC on the knees, there are people who can pull that off, and they've got necks that are 18 inches wide, and they've got deltoids that basically rub the bottom of their ears, and those people are hard to triangle. But the rest of us, we could get every single technical detail right of that guard pass, and it will all that will happen is that we will tap from triangle chokes or maybe omoplatas again and again and again.
That was the one that was called the Gracie Gift, right? I believe.
Yeah.
Is that the famous?
Yeah. And then for a long time it was like, well, if you're getting triangles, then you're not doing all the details correctly. But fortunately,
you're just missing the details. You got to believe sensitivity. Play with it.
Well, unfortunately, it would work maybe if the guys doing the triangles weren't also trying to figure out how to, apply it. Oh, he shifted his hand from here to there. Well, that's easy. I can just do this. Oh, the triangle still works.
Yeah.
It. The passing, the guard passing certainly is a great example. People passing much, much, much more standing, which strangely leads to sort of an increased number of opportunities for leg locks, doesn't it?
It does it? You see my evil plot? I'm just trying to get people standing pass more. You know what? I think we should call it standing pass. Why don't you put out a DVD on that? We'll do a joint DVD.
Yeah.
Standing passing.
It's really important that both legs are straight and that you bait your opponent to be able to grab at least one of your heels. And with your legs wide apart.
Yeah. Make sure you stay square, too. Don't stagger.
Yeah. That's so funny. So who... of all the big, it seems like a big evolution in MMA recently, in the last, I'll say, 4 years maybe, is how leg locks have started coming up due to the prevalence of leg lock specialists like Paul Harris, Imanari. Mm-hmm. You could make an argument for Ryan
Hall has been finishing a lot of people. Yeah.
There were guys. One of the guys I came up under was Eric Paulson, who, of course, has been preaching the leg lock gospel since the 80s. But ironically, most of the fights he won in Shuto, not many of them were with leg locks. He adopted more of either a ground and pound or a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu approach to finishing. But of those sort of leg lock specialists in MMA, who do you think you're most similar to? Like, whose approach?
Well, we actually took a lot from Polaris. I think that's where John got his initial ideas for the breaking mechanics of our outside heel hook, which is a very challenging heel hook to actually be able to finish. It's a very subtle submission. Like the inverted or inside heel hooks, we always call it the rocket launcher of submissions. Just get close and it's good. But the outside heel hook, you need a lot of techniques, a lot of precision with it. To be able to finish, rather. And Polaris, actually, we don't believe his game has that much depth, but he's got a very good outside heel hook, which we've modeled ours after. That being said, I like, Marcin Held has some cool entrances. I had to mimic his game when my training partner was going to compete against him like a year ago. So I studied a lot of how he enters the legs and variations of how he finishes. My game's very different than his. Mm-hmm. But, in terms of entrances, because, when we do fence wrestling or grapple box, I enter very differently than anybody currently. Like, I have a whole system of entrances just because I can't out-wrestle anybody. So, but against the fence, actually, like, grapplers can do very well. Like, I think it's very underutilized in MMA, fence wrestling for grapplers. Like, you see guys just grinding with under-overs. They're not thinking about entering into submissions, really. And I think there's a lot of missed opportunity there. I like Ryan Hall's Imanari rolls a lot. They're just, you see him spam them a bit, just like Imanari did. You see the highlight reel where they hit them, but you don't see the 8 where they missed, and maybe 8 a shot or 2 on the way in. Mm-hmm. So I think, I think it's a cool move, but I don't know if it's the highest percentage technique to enter the legs in MMA.
So for people listening who are not familiar with this, it's an amazing thing to watch. You basically throw yourself along the mat upside down and bring and entwine.
It's like one of the coolest moves you could ever imagine. Yeah.
Yes.
If you could dream up an awesome move, it's this. It looks like this.
Yeah.
So all the white belts out there listening, go research or draft this. Imanari rolls.
Yeah.
Won't be disappointed.
Yeah. But it's also a land of spectacular fails, as I found the very first time that after drilling it, 5 or 6 times to master it, I tried pulling it off against a training partner who basically, I got squished. I got I paid the price, and at the same time, I got resoundingly mocked.
When people sprawl instinctively, you get a knee right in the face. Like that's what they don't tell you about this. a high-risk maneuver.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the divergence between Ghee and Nogi, because I think it's fair to say that a significant portion of your game, if you all of a sudden if I offered you $100,000 per match to switch to, or to go compete at the Mundials with the Ghee, you might do it. But
I'll take it. Yeah.
You have to modify your game.
I'll do it for $50 and a pizza. I think you overestimate just what I'll do for small amounts of money.
Well, let's leave that to another my specialty podcast.
Never mind.
Yeah, that's a special subscription podcast. Anyhow, moving right along.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So I mean, you would get
the game modifies in the Ghee.
Right. All right.
Yeah, I'd get disqualified and banned from ever stepping foot in an IBJJF-owned event ever within 30 seconds if I played my Nogi game. But I do play in the Ghee. You know, I do have toe holds, and in the Ghee, it's actually much easier to get to the leg. Like when we roll in the Ghee with heel hooks, it's easy. Mm-hmm. It's really easy. It's because all these leg scrambles. Look at a high level IBJJF event. Look at the Europeans. Mm-hmm. It's not hard to get to somebody's leg. It's hard to finish because you can't reap, you can't heel hook, so you have a lot of limited options there.
Well, let's talk about the dangers of reaping here. How many times have you gotten to a reaping position and had the guy's knee explode? Like, this must be a daily occurrence
never hurt
for you.
Somebody. Yeah. Yeah, the knee shattered and bones flew everywhere. I've never actually even seen anybody hurt reaping. There's some video evidence of reaping heel hooks that got really bad.
Oh, for sure.
I've seen people hurt with, but I've never seen just the reap itself hurt anybody, I don't think. I'd like to be proven wrong if anyone has video evidence of that.
Oh, there was that guy who won the Mundial screaming in pain from a knee leap. But then he managed to recover very quickly and run around the mat with his arms raised after his opponent
with his Ghee opened, right?
Yeah, and embrace his training partners. So it apparently was a temporary injury. But I don't know
apparently it wasn't as bad as it seemed.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've seen leg lock entries go quite badly, especially like flying scissor type things or rolling knee bars.
Yeah.
I've seen those. Yep. Injure people quite badly, and that's why I describe the flying scissors. I love the flying scissors. It's a fantastic self-defense move because most of the things that go wrong for the other person.
Yep. But it's so dangerous. I know so many people hurt by that. One of my better training partners was really, really hurt with one of them. Not by me, but
yeah. I used to rant and rave about this because when I was doing judo, the flying scissors or the kani basami was the perfect counter to uchimata. So all those guys have the beautiful judo throws where you'd go ask over tea kettle, and they're squaring up sideways to you. The one thing you can always
it's just like they're teeing off to give you a kani basami. Yeah,
exactly. But unfortunately, so they banned it, and I cried conspiracy theory. But really, as years have gone on, and I've seen more and more people injured with it.
They were just doing it to stifle you,
Yeah, pretty much. Yes, jiu-jitsu and judo conspiracy theories. But in terms of a knee reap, bringing that leg across and putting the guy into a bad position, I have never seen that injure anybody either. And I would make an argument that in that example with my Jersey Shore guy, when I tore his ACL because he was spinning out of it, if I'd had him in a knee reap, he wouldn't have been able to. It would have actually been safer.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been able to move, yeah.
Right. So that's what I was saying. It's my fault for not controlling the position.
I think, of course, you can't always control. The most dangerous thing in all of grappling is falling body weight. That's hurt more people more significantly than any other technique or move I've ever seen. Jumping close guard, flying submissions, people falling or spazzing out of stuff with their own body weight. When they spin out of leg locks a lot of times. I've seen so many people hurt themselves. Yeah, but reaping is not, it's a way of actually minimizing that. So I think it's left over. I think they banned in IBJJF. The legend goes that, you know, the IBGF guys, you know, or the original Gracies who had those tournaments, you know, had fights with the Luta Livre guys who did a lot of leg locks, and I think they thought if they banned reaping and heel hooks, they would, you know, be able to maintain supremacy over the Luta Livre guys. At least that's a legend I heard. But
they banned reaping a lot more recently than that. So
really, when was reaping banned? How long ago?
Oh, good Lord! If I only had a producer, I could look it up. But unfortunately, we're going to have to.
I was going to say, let's go to the producer. I'll wait.
We'll. How about we let the audience tell us? I'm sure there's somebody who's done a study of it. But it's my understanding it's only like last.
Oh, so then apparently that is just a
years.
legend then.
Yeah, but I think it certainly is a way to shut down. I mean, leg locks are the answer to a lot of beautiful open guard work, and if you're trying to encourage beautiful open guard work. And it kind of, you don't get that if a guy's like, oh, great, I mean, jump to the leg. After all, there are photos of Helio Gracie doing ankle locks, you know, from the 50s.
There was a picture of him doing a heel hook, wasn't there?
I haven't seen that one. I've heard about it. I heard that, how did it go? That the heel hooks came to Japan from a Brazilian pro wrestler. Something like that. Again, I shouldn't be talking about this if I don't know the truth, but it's this weird cultural pollination of jiu-jitsu coming from Japan, going to Brazil, going into pro wrestling. I mean, maybe that was through the whole catch as catch can stuff. I don't know. Then going back to Japan, getting absorbed by all the pancrase, you know, and the shuto and the shoot boxing and shoot wrestling, that whole Japanese thing, and then eventually coming back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, it just goes to show that you can't put, you know, national boundaries around an idea in the era of starting with videotape, moving on to DVD and now streaming video. Like, and if something works, people are going to figure it out pretty damn quick and start using it because nobody wants to lose.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the nice part about a merit-based competitive, you know, art is that things will evolve, and they'll evolve quickly. When they do. You know, if someone comes up with a move tomorrow that just, you know, destroys everyone, you know, in a heartbeat, when as soon as they pull open guard, everyone will start doing it, you know, and then we'll figure out counters to it and recounters. So I think the spread naturally will happen. You know, if the technique's effective, it's going to spread. If it's not effective, it won't.
So you're, these days, you're still competing in a lot of tournaments, but you seem to be moving more into super fights. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And I like tournaments a lot because I get more matches. However, super fights make a lot more sense, aside from the fact that you do make a little bit of money. I think, you know, both competitors can come in with a nice game plan for each other. You know, they're both ready. You know, you get to see the best competition between two singular competitors, especially when they have time to plan and prepare for each other, as opposed to a tournament where, you know, if you meet a grappler in a tournament, sometimes you might have had a rougher draw than them or vice versa. You know, they weren't sure they were going to meet you. There's, you know, it was a long day. Maybe someone had two tough matches. And you don't get to see necessarily the purest competition between the two. So super fights appeal to me for that reason. You can prepare better, I think.
Do you have any big super fights coming up?
I do, actually. Funny you mentioned that. I'm competing against a really, really good black belt from Marcelo's named Muncher Kara. I think his friends call him Munchie. But he's a very good grappler, a good single X guard player, actually. So I have a super fight with him, I believe March 11th or 12th at Grappling Industries. So very excited about that.
Okay. And some other big ones that you can't quite tell us about yet.
Yeah, Polaris, I have a really big match, you know. So I think everyone knows I'm in Polaris, but the match is really, really exciting. And then EBI, where it's, you know, shaping up to be just pretty much the best and biggest guys in the world. So it's going to be a really exciting competition season for me coming up.
Well, how much do you weigh?
Trying desperately to eat a lot, but we'll see.
How much do you weigh?
I struggle to stay around like 155, 160 if I'm eating a lot.
Okay.
You know, just with all the training all day, I don't really put on more than that. trying. I don't know if these burkers are going to save me from Cyborg.
So when you say big matches, you don't only mean big as in important. You mean against big guys.
High splice, yeah. These dudes are big. Have you seen the Ebi6 lineup yet?
Yeah, I've seen it. There's some big people and big names. It's actually very exciting.
Yeah. No, it's like a dream tournament. Like, I'm so happy to just even be a part of it. Just to compete at that level with these guys is just, it's just incredible. That's why you get into this. It's why you want to compete, to compete against guys like this. And it's just amazing.
I'm not sure everybody wants to compete against guys, 100 pounds more than them. I'm not sure that's a universal fixation or fetish.
Yeah. But maybe I'm insane.
Yeah. Well, I guess tapping them. If as we determined earlier, the highlight reel is important, then you want the biggest.
I'm just going to try to cartwheel past them, and that's it.
Yeah. No-handed cartwheels. I think that's the key.
Yeah, that's it. I tried the no-handed cartwheel past Cyborg. Come on, I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Teaching at seminars for the next decade.
Yes, here's how to counter the no-handed cartwheel. Well, that's fantastic. I know you teach some seminars and you teach some privates. You don't have a lot of time because you're focusing on your training and your competing career and making hay while the sun shines. Mm-hmm. But if people do want to pay you exorbitant amounts of money to pick your brain about Leglocks or any other topic in jiu-jitsu, how do they get in touch with you?
I think my Facebook page or Instagram are both good ways to do it. I actually don't manage any of my social media. I have Jeff Chu, my friend and manager, who handles all that for me, so I could just focus on training. He's a professional social media guy, so I think he's using all my accounts for practice, but he's really good at it. So he usually handles all that. Like, if you send me a message, you're talking to him, not me.
Okay.
But so if you message him, he'll set it up and organize it. Yeah, well, we're usually pretty busy. I like teaching seminars. I like training with everybody and getting to different places. But I do focus very seriously on, my jiu-jitsu and my own training and my own research. So, a lot of time goes to that.
Quantities are limited. Buy now. Don't forget.
Yeah. Artificially increasing demand. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. I'm actually just sitting around all day. I don't do anything. No. I'll wait.
Yeah.
But after this competition season, hopefully I'll teach some seminars.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been fantastic to talk to you, Eddie. Thank you so much for sharing some information. I think it's, it is a really exciting time in jiu-jitsu, and I think, to see the specialists come out, right? I mean, I don't want to say simple games, but maybe because if you find slice something,
no, it is a simple game. It is.
It's a simple game plan, maybe, but the game itself is. There are many, many nuances and many, many details to it. But it's fascinating to watch people explore these areas as deeply. And honestly, it is an example of a rising tide lifting all boats. I think if you're teaching jiu-jitsu for self-defense and you're not covering things like a heel hook, quite honestly, you're doing your students a disservice. I mean, maybe you'll have more constraints about how they're allowed to train it in live sparring or whatever. You got to get in your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. But how can you not make this a basic if you're? There was that fantastic video that Faraz Zahabi put out, and your friend and training partner Gary Tonin was in it, of just pure grappling against some MMA guys who had some, I think they were jiu-jitsu blue belts and had some MMA experience, and they were allowed to punch, and it's amazing how many of those matches ended in a heel hook. Like that, if you need any proof of that, there you go. Here, last topic. In the old days, when in the early days of MMA, you had sort of the Japanese fighters fighting the Brazilians. That the Japanese organizations would bring in their token Brazilian fighter, and the fight would go something like this. They would box, they'd end up on the ground. Japanese guy would go for a leg lock. If he got it, the fight would be over. If he didn't get it, he'd get mounted and pounded into a pulp So the fights all ended with basically ground and pound from the mount or a rear naked choke, or a heel hook by the Japanese guy. There was never any...
it was a very sharp distinction.
Yes. And so I think that distinction has become blurred, but what do you think it is that's made people to... Because then after a while, everyone veered away from leg locks, like, oh, if they don't work, then you're going to get pounded.
I think it's like you said, you have to be good at the basics, too. You have to be good, there's a lot of grappling that's happening. A heel hook's not going to make up for not knowing how to hold guard or how to escape mount. It's absolutely not going to fix that. It can give you essentially a puncher's chance in submission grappling, but it's not, you can base a game plan off, but it's like I said, if you have all these huge holes in your game, you're not going to be able to even enact that or to recover when it goes south. So I think it was an oversimplistic analysis where it's like you go for a leg lock, you're going to get punched,
Right.
And can you get, ground and pounded out when going for a leg lock? Sure. But can you also defend yourself very well going for leg locks? Absolutely. It just, look at Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall would get punched that badly going for leg locks.
And it was Ryan Hall who defended the 50-50 as a self-defense position. When I interviewed him a long time ago on an earlier podcast, he pointed out that he can't think of very many more secure ways of if somebody's on top of you punching you, put him in 50-50.
To deal with it.
And tie him up that way, even if you don't leg lock them or even if you don't submit them or sweep them, they can generate that much force from there. And you're pretty safe, so, maybe 50-50 needs to be taught before closed guard. How's that? How's that as a thought?
There's an argument for it in all seriousness. It teaches a lot of fundamentals of grip fighting, precision, and it's a symmetric position. I actually thought about this. I had a conversation about using 50-50 on fresh people, not teaching them the heel hook, maybe an Achilles lock, telling them specifically don't do heel hooks. But, it's a symmetric position, right? It teaches grip fighting, tempo, control, moving all your limbs at the same time, your legs and your hands. Like, I don't know. You suggested it like it's a crazy idea, but I think you learn a lot about grappling from that position, from starting in that position.
Okay. We'll have to reconvene this conversation in a couple of years when the Gracie Combatives curriculum now is all based around the 50-50. Because I know they're listening.
50-50 of Barabolos.
Yeah, exactly.
But, but thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, we've done enough damage to jiu-jitsu for one day, so I really appreciate the conversation, Eddie. And best of luck in the super fights coming up.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You too. Good luck with everything.
Podcast listeners, if you found this interesting or useful or entertaining, please pass this episode on to somebody else in your social circle or in your training circle. Surely there's somebody else out there who would also find it interesting. This is the way the podcast grows. It's an organic growth by people like you passing it on to their friends and the people that they know. I really, really appreciate this kind of sharing. So thank you so much in advance and good luck with your training.